I'm going to go over a video today created by Gray Hughes, which shows the timeline of events the day of the killings. Hughes based this video on evidence from the arrest affidavit, and he did a great job. It really puts everything in perspective. Questions remain, of course. Is there a case to be made for reasonable doubt? Did Richard Allen go to the bridge specifically to meet the girls, or were they just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Did he have accomplices? And there's the question of the police. What are the reasons they screwed this up so badly? And from what we now know, this case should have been solved within a matter of a couple of weeks at the most, but it took almost 6 years. The point is not to blame anyone. What matters is trying to understand how these mistakes get made in the first place in order to produce better police work in the future. It's crucial that other police forces learn from this, because it does seem that police are botching big cases like this everywhere you turn. We see this going on now in Idaho, too. This is just my opinion, but I believe most of the cops involved in these cases are good people, and in most ways, they're probably excellent cops. But something is going wrong with their approach to these kind of murders. Look, I'm no expert. I have no experience in law enforcement, and I've only been studying these kinds of crimes for less than a year. But even in that short time, it's been shocking to see just how ineffective police are in murder cases where the motive is unclear. You shouldn't take my word. I'll show you some of the cases. You'll agree with me, not because I have some special ability to point this stuff out, but because it's just plain obvious. Any regular person can see it. Check out our episode 2 on the Idaho murder mystery for more evidence of ineffective police work. But we'll see enough here in Delphi to really alert us to the fact that something is really wrong. If by the end of this video you agree with me, please click subscribe. If you disagree, please feel free to drive by and egg my house. Sorry about the shades. I'm not trying to look cool, and it would take more than shades for that. I'm on medicine that makes my eyes sensitive to light, so I start blinking. I'll link to Gray Hughes' video below. I've watched a few of his episodes. He seems to do excellent work. I don't watch many of them because they tend to be very long, and I prefer reading in my research. Before I start the video, I want to say something. We have to always be humble. When we get a fact wrong, we have to be willing to correct it. If we speculate, and our speculation turns out wrong, we shouldn't dig in our heels. But this also means we have to be willing to make some mistakes. Understanding comes from a process, and that process includes taking wrong paths. To me, this channel is just a platform for a small group of people to learn together. One of our subscribers, Octavia, got very mad at me for the speculation in the last video. I respect her, and I feel bad about that, but I'm not going to stop speculating. However, there are boundaries. We don't want to cast suspicion on innocent people or family members. I think we should be cautious about floating conspiracies that involve a lot of people, unless, of course, the evidence suggests it. But I do think some speculation is a very important part of the process of understanding. Okay, let's go. The video begins with 3 teenage girls at the Monon High Bridge. These girls later reported to police about having seen a man on the trail who was dressed like what came to be called Bridge Guy. We can chart the timeline because of photos they took, starting at the bridge. Then what looks like Richard Allen's car is spotted by surveillance at the Harvest store at 1:27, right while the 3 girls are taking a pic of the bench. The car parks at the CPS building, which was unoccupied. A witness called Sue remembers seeing the car parked in a strange way so the license plate would be blocked. If so, this suggests Allen knew he was going to commit a crime, or at least might commit a crime. Hughes' video has Allen sitting in the parked car for about 10 minutes. Did he make a phone call? My guess is that it's not known if he was in the car or doing something else close by. The 10-minute delay is accounted for in the next point in the timeline. At 1:41, the 3 juveniles and Allen pass each other on the trail. Not only did the girls testify of this encounter, but Allen himself did when he came in days after the murders to talk to the police. So this establishes beyond a reasonable doubt that he was on the trail at that time. How accurate is 141? Well, the pic the girls took at the bench is presumably time-stamped at 127. Sue arrives at 144. She sees the girls crossing the highway. Her car passes the Harvest store at 146. This will be on surveillance, so we can work the timeline back from that point. So between the juveniles taking the photo at the bench at 127 and Sue going by the Harvest store at 146, I think that sets the time range for Alan to encounter the three teens on the trail from a couple of minutes before or after 141. So it's pretty accurate. Next, we see Abby and Libby arriving in Kelsey's car. Kelsey goes by the Harvest store at 149. So Abby and Libby get dropped off around the same time Alan actually reaches Monon High Bridge. Man. So Alan arrives at the bridge only 10 minutes before Abby and Libby do. The walk along the trail is only 10 minutes. That timing alone seems to make it much more likely that this was not a random encounter. I'm not saying it wasn't, but this was not a situation where Alan was hanging around by the bridge for an hour or two waiting to see if someone might show up. Meanwhile, Sue is on the trail about 6 or 7 minutes ahead of Abby and Libby. She arrives at the bridge, sees Bridge Guy hanging around on it, finds him creepy, and she turns back. The trail ends at the bridge, of course, so she would have been turning back anyway, but perhaps if Alan was not on the bridge, she would have ventured out onto it herself to take a look, or maybe she would have lingered around for some photos. We don't know. In case, she returned, and about halfway, she passed Libby and Abby. None of them knew it, but Libby and Abby were moments away from entering a nightmare. In his video, Hughes has them pass Alan as they arrive at the bridge. This is based, I presume, on Sue seeing Alan on the bridge. He also testified to being on the bridge, looking at fish below, which sounds weird and should have been a red flag to police. We don't know if Abby and Libby actually saw Alan at the beginning of the bridge or passed him on the trail. It's possible he hid in the woods. We should ask here, if Alan was meeting the girls at the bridge, why didn't he confront them right then and there when they arrived? In any case, Libby and Abby start down the bridge. You can see the bridge is long, crossing not only the creek, but a lengthy section of woods and hills. Libby snaps a pic of the bridge at 2:03. The girls reach the end of the bridge and turn around. That's when they spot Bridge Guy and take a photo of him coming towards them. It's 2:14. So the walk along the bridge takes 10 minutes. If Alan knew the girls were coming and was there because of that, why does he wait 5 or 10 minutes to follow the girls down the bridge? Hughes speculates in the video that Alan headed down the trail, perhaps as much as 5 or 10 minutes, then turned back behind the girls. If he came to the bridge because he knew the girls would be there and he planned to do something to them. Once across the bridge, Alan forces the girl at gunpoint to go down the hill into the woods. He leads them across the creek to the location where he murders them. They arrive at that location around 2:21. Hughes has Alan remain with the girls till 3:47. This is because it's at 3:58 that a driver sees Alan walking along the road back towards his car, covered in mud and blood. The bodies were said to be staged in some way. So hopefully the girls were not alive and suffering during this long time. But what needs to be figured out is whether Abby and Libby were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or whether something else was going on. This impacts whether it's likely they were accomplices. I want to line up 3 pieces of evidence that might shed some light on this. These are things we've just gone over. 1, witnesses describe Alan's car parked in the weird way to hide his license plate. 2, Alan arrived at the bridge only 10 minutes before Abby and Libby did. And 3, Alan did not abduct the girls before the bridge. He waited about 5 or 10 minutes before crossing the bridge himself to catch up to them. Let's start with the first thing, the weirdly parked car and the witness statements about the car. There's a lot about this that has people confused. Some of that is due to the way the affidavit is written, and much of it is due to the inconsistencies in parts of the witness statements, which is normal. A friend of this channel, Dave Jenkins, had a discussion with me on this. It caused me to go back and reread the affidavit. We have a difference of opinion on this. And because Dave has such an astute mind, it really had me questioning my thinking on this. Look, every one of us, especially the police, have to be careful not to favor interpretations of evidence that match conclusions we already have. Was I doing that with the car? Could there have been two cars? I didn't know. So I wanted to go back and look carefully at the witness statements. You guys can let me know if you agree with my conclusions. The witness statements seem to refer to two different vehicles, an SUV and a car, parked at the old CPS building. My understanding was that none of the witnesses saw two vehicles parked there. Having reread the affidavit, that's still my understanding. There are 5 witnesses who describe what they saw, and all of them refer to one vehicle. And this was all within a half-hour period. Richard Allen drove a black Ford Focus. It's a car. The affidavit also describes a witness reporting a purple PT Cruiser, which is an SUV. In fact, Keegan Klein's grandmother drove a purple PT Cruiser. Things that make us go, right? So what did the witnesses actually describe? Let's start with the 3 juvenile girls. All of them said there was one car parked there. One said it was a PT Cruiser. Another described it as an SUV. And the third described it as a smart car. Let's look at a comparison of the two vehicles. Here's the Focus. Here's the PT Cruiser. They're actually very similar vehicles. Both have hatchbacks instead of trunks. The affidavit says the girls all saw Richard Allen's Focus, despite some variance in description. Sue, the witness who encountered Bridge Guy at the bridge and who passed Libby and Abby on the trail, described a vehicle that was oddly parked, backed in to hide the license plate. I don't know if she described the car itself. She said it was not odd for vehicles to be parked there, but that the way this car was parked is what drew her attention to it. Minutes later, a man driving by noticed what he described as a purple PT Cruiser or a small SUV. He was talking about a single vehicle. He also described it as backed in, as though to conceal the license plate. So it's fairly clear, I think, that we're talking about one car. No one saw two cars there at the same time. All of these observations were within a half hour, so it seems very unlikely that one car drove off and another backed in the same way in the same spot. Therefore, I think only one car was parked there, and all the descriptions had it close to Richard Allen's Ford Focus. 2 witnesses described it as parked to conceal the plate. We should be cautious about that, but let's cautiously accept it as a fact. If Allen was trying to hide his license plate, that suggests he knew he might be about to commit a crime. Dave Jenkins also astutely points out that this parking location was a significant distance from the trail entrance, which is also suspicious. Though looking at the map, I don't see anywhere else to park. Someone else can check us on that. So does suspicious parking by Allen mean he knew the girls would be there? Not necessarily. He could have parked like this multiple times on multiple occasions, waiting for the right opportunity. The second item of evidence I drew your attention to is the fact that Allen arrived at the trail only 10 minutes before Abby and Libby. That could be coincidence, of course, but it does make us wonder if he knew they'd be there at that time. But then we get into the third timeline evidence that I pointed out. The way Gray Hughes shows this on the video, the girls pass Allen on the trail somewhere near the bridge. Then they start down the bridge around 1:58. Allen waits 5 or 10 minutes before following them onto the bridge. Now, I find this strange. Why not abduct the girls before the bridge? Or why not catch up to them soon after they start down the bridge, show them the gun, then lead them to whatever end of the bridge he wants? The bridge is very long, 853 feet. The average person's walking step is 2.5 feet. Abby and Libby were just kids, and the bridge is awkward, consisting of spaced planks. So maybe the girls walked in 2-foot steps. It took them 10 minutes to cross. Richard Allen, smaller and older, probably couldn't do much better. So he was risking that the girls might reach the end, see him coming, and then continue down to the road below. The trail did not continue after the bridge, but there must be paths down to the private road which leads to Route 265 West. It was winter, no brush. The girls could reach the road in a minute or two and call for a ride. Allen knew they weren't old enough to have driven themselves. As it happened, the girls didn't get spooked and head down to the road, but they could have. Allen risked their escape by waiting 5 or 10 minutes to cross after them. So we have some evidence that is pulling against each other. The strangely parked car suggests Allen planned to commit a crime or possibly commit one anyway. His arrival only 10 minutes before the girls suggests he might have known they'd be there. And maybe even his waiting 10 minutes suggests he was early for a meeting. But Alan's actions around the bridge, waiting 5 or 10 minutes to follow the girls, to me seems indecisive, not like someone on a mission to intercept these two particular girls. Recently, the Daily Mail published an article claiming that inside sources have told them a wild tale. According to them, Alan was working with Keegan Kline and Ronald Logan, and the plan was to kidnap the girls and bring them to Logan's house. It reports that they were part of a local pedophile ring. According to these sources, Alan botched the kidnapping and killed the girls. I have to say, I found the article absurd and perhaps even irresponsible. I guess it depends on how good their sources are. I mean, if they truly have inside information, then it's not necessarily irresponsible, as the job of journalists is to expose the truth. But I doubt they have real inside sources. The story says Alan was leading the girls to Logan's house when, I quote, something went wrong and he knifed and raped one of them and almost decapitated the other, which sounds insensible to me. Let's say he's leading the girls to Logan's house and the girls try to run. So he knifes and rapes one and then kills the other. He doesn't call Logan and Kline and say, let's get these bodies out of here. Instead, he stages a crime scene for investigators to find. That seems to me just like a wild attempt to connect the dots of various theories and suspects. If Kline is cooperating, did he rat out Alan? If so, why is none of that in the affidavit? Why does the evidence that led to the arrest seem to have nothing to do with Kline? Police were simply looking at old witness statements. They realized that Alan admitted to seeing the other juveniles. They knew that these three girls were about 10 minutes before Abby and Libby. This put Alan at the scene, yet he said he never saw the girls, which is implausible if he's innocent. Of course, if he walked back along the trail to his car, he'd be behind Sue and Sue past the girls. Therefore, he would have seen Abby and Libby. So Alan should have been a suspect from the beginning. And all that they had to do was check his gun to see if it matched the unspent bullet found with the bodies. Alan was a registered gun owner. Police knew he had guns, or should have. No tip was needed. No breakthrough piece of evidence. All of it has been right there all along. But 6 years, Alan has lived free. But did he act alone? Richard Allen not only killed these girls, but he undressed them and staged their bodies. So killing was his end game. Pedophiles might work together, but killers like this work alone. If this was a case where the killing at that moment was unplanned, where something went wrong, he would have fled or tried to hide the bodies. But he spent time with them because he was there to kill. He was not there to abduct them and deliver them to someone else. When we look at police statements over the years and at the transcript of their interrogation of Keegan Kline, it's reasonable to guess that they have all of Libby's communications, and they found no evidence she arranged to meet anyone at the bridge. Is it possible there's some communication they were never able to discover? Yes, but not likely. They subpoenaed the companies that run the apps over which those communications occurred. When you analyze police statements before the arrest of Allen, you see them stumped and frustrated because the catfishing was their only lead, yet there seemed to be no indication Libby planned to meet anyone there. Libby's sister, Kelsey, seemed to always believe the killings were random. How do I explain that Allen arrived only 10 minutes before the girls? Look, in that short 20-minute period, at least 6 people walked the trail to the bridge. 5 of them, including Abby and Libby, were juvenile girls. It was a place kids and others frequently went to. Allen, who worked at CVS, would know the kids were out of school for February break. Who knows how many times he went down there to attempt to enact his fantasy. It seems like if he picked any time on a nice day when kids had school off, there was a chance some girls might wander by every 5 or 10 minutes or so. If he'd gotten there 10 minutes earlier, maybe he would have taken the 3 other girls. Maybe he would have taken Sue if she wandered out onto the bridge where he was waiting. When he saw Sue turn and leave, he realized his mistake and waiting there. No girls would start down that narrow bridge if some creepy dude was hanging out on it. So he changed strategy and perhaps hid in the woods or just kind of lingered a short distance from the bridge. It's also possible Allen was on the fence about committing a crime. If this was his first, he probably had been on the fence many years, or if his daughter moving out triggered him several months, But he might have been on the fence. He came armed, perhaps not for the first time, and parked his car to hide the plate. Maybe when Sue started walking back a few minutes later, he did too. He passed Libby and Abby, and maybe they giggled at the odd little man. That's not something he would forgive. So we still don't know. Some of Alan's actions suggest he expected the girls to be there. The fact Keegan Kline communicated to Libby with his catfish account, Anthony Schatz, is an enormous coincidence if it's not connected. But if police have all of Libby's communications and the girls didn't tell anyone they were going to the bridge, then Alan acted alone. Will Alan's attorneys be able to make a good case for reasonable doubt? Based on the evidence we have now, no. His team will bring in experts to argue that the science behind matching an unspent bullet to a weapon is unreliable. Okay. They'll say if he was guilty, he would have disposed of the gun. They'll point out to the jurors that Alan voluntarily came in to tell police he had been on the trail that day. But the circumstantial case is powerful. We know, by his own admission, that he passed the 3 juvenile witnesses as he started onto the trail. It's about a 10-minute walk to the bridge, where he admitted he was looking down at the fish. Reaching the bridge about 5 minutes after him was Sue. She saw him on the bridge. Sue and the 3 girls all described him as having similar clothing to the bridge guy photo Libby took. At this moment, when Sue saw him on the bridge, Abby and Libby had already started down the trail. Sue passed them a few minutes later. Alan testified he never saw Abby and Libby. For this to be true, he would have to have returned to his car by some other means than the trail, because they were only 5 minutes behind Sue, and he would have to pass them. That's probably already enough to convict him, especially when combined with the bullet evidence. But also, at 3:57, a witness reported seeing someone muddy and bloody walking along the road in the direction of the CPS building. The description matched bridge guy. And of course, police might have other evidence they haven't revealed. There could be DNA from the girls or blood evidence from inside Alan's car. It said the killer took trophies, so there could be evidence found in Alan's home. Alan's lawyers have their work cut out. Finally, we have to go over how police have handled or mishandled this case. As far as we know at this point, here's how police caught him. They were recently going over witness statements, and someone finally recognized that Alan was at the scene and he's a registered gun owner. So they finally decided to test the gun. There's no evidence at this point that anyone tipped police off. We do have indications Keegan Kline had been cooperating since this summer, so it's understandable people suspect a connection there. Maybe. But it seems to me police just hit another dead end with Kline, and out of frustration, they went back to square one and poured over the witness interviews. That's when they spotted the fact that Alan was likely at the bridge not long before the girls, and that he's a registered gun owner. It's inexcusable. Whether Alan is part of some conspiracy with others, whether he knew Keegan Kline, whether he knew Ronald Logan, they should have checked Alan's gun within days of his interview. He should have been under arrest within a couple of weeks of the murder. Again, I'm not trying to attack the police. It's not about that. It's about figuring out why mistakes in police investigations seem so common. It's about learning in order to improve police investigations. Podcasts can actually play a crucial role here. Not me, my channel is small. But do you really think the police in Indiana are going to completely come clean about how they screwed this up? Do you trust the media will cover this properly? It seems to me that what went wrong with the investigation can be summed up in 2 words: tunnel vision. The police initially focused on the neighbor, Ronald Logan, because he had provided a false alibi. In fact, he'd begun constructing this alibi before the girls were even found. The FBI was very confident that this was the guy because of this. Tunnel vision. Then it quickly emerged that Libby had been catfished by Keegan Kline. So that had to be the key, right? They then spent 5 years chasing that fat ass down his rabbit holes. Again, tunnel vision. When you read the transcript of the interview with Richard Allen from days after the murder, it's clear they only viewed him as a potential witness, not a potential suspect. For some reason, he didn't fit what they were expecting. Maybe it's because he came forward on his own. Maybe it's because he knows someone involved in the investigation. But when you look at the timeline Gray Hughes shows us, and this was all evidence that the police had almost from the beginning. How was Allen not a suspect all along? Tunnel vision, false assumptions. sloppiness. The state of Indiana invested huge resources into solving this case. But the problem wasn't resources, and it wasn't lack of good intentions. They desperately wanted to solve the case. And this is not an Indiana thing. It happens in police departments everywhere, as far as I can tell. This is about how investigators approach a case. The FBI was no better than the state police, who are no better than the town of Delphi police. This is about learning how to think critically. It's about always challenging your own assumptions. And at the end of the day, it takes humility to challenge one's assumptions. You have to always be ready to admit your ideas are wrong. That's what police have to learn. Richard Allen parked at the old CPS building, Child Protective Services. That seems ironic. If police want to protect children, if they want to protect the innocent, they need to rethink how they do things. And if they won't do it on their own, the public needs to apply the pressure. Thank you for your support. Please consider hitting the subscribe button. The little bell next to that is the notify button. Select that so you can join our conversations. And please join them. I'm not doing this for my looks. Obviously,